Welcome to Two Ladies Just Talking About Mental Health. Today, we get into boundaries, burnout, and recuperation. And Joss and I get into a little mini book club discussion at the end of the episode. Full disclosure, this episode was recorded before our episode with life coach Rhea Williams, where we discuss Inside Out 2. So this is actually our 5th episode, and thank you so much for sticking with us. Let's start the show.
Go.
Hi, I'm Joss.
And I'm Shar.
And together, we're two ladies just talking about mental health.
We come from very different backgrounds, race, family, religion, but we share one major thing in common. We both have tendencies towards anxiety and depression.
And while we don't have any mental health degrees or credentials, we do consider ourselves experts in our own mental health journeys because we live it daily.
Together, we'll share some tips, stories, and interview mental health experts and guests with lived experiences.
Because we believe that sharing stories is key to destigmatizing mental health and feeling less alone.
Join us. We're two ladies just talking about mental health.
Go.
Hi, listeners. I'm Joss from Two Ladies Just Talking About Mental Health with Joss and Shar. If you're experiencing a mental health emergency or crisis, please remember these 3 numbers, 988. By calling or texting 988, you can speak with or chat with a mental health professional who can help you. Someone's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You don't have to suffer alone, and help is just 3 digits away. So write this down, 988. And if you don't have access to a phone, please go to your nearest emergency room for immediate care. Good morning, Shar.
Hi, Joss.
How are you?
Oh, I'm tired.
I agree. I feel exactly the same.
But I'm happy to be here. Thank you for joining us, listeners. This is our 4th episode.
Episode 4 already.
Yeah.
Already.
I'm really proud of it.
Yeah. And I'm so surprised that we have made it through 4 weeks. You know,
we haven't canceled once.
And we're cancelers.
Oh, yeah. We're going to get into that today. We're cancelers.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. We have to get into that. But, you know, before we get started with the show and get into things, Shar, I know you have the tip of the day. So if you could just go ahead and share that.
Yes.
Would be great.
Today's tip is saying no if and when you can. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, sometimes that looks like canceling. Sometimes that might look like saying no to an extra task at work. Again, I know this is not always possible. We can't always say no to a boss. That's really hard.
So true.
Saying no to social events that feel like obligations instead of something that sounds fun. When we can, say no. You know, there's a whole line of consent as well, saying no.
Yeah.
But I thought of it because when I was living in New York, I had 10 different tax forms. That's how many jobs I was working as a freelancer.
Yeah.
And my roommate and best friend and I realized how hard it was for us to turn down jobs. Especially as a freelancer, when you need to hustle and you don't know when the next job is going to come or not, to say yes, 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 yes. As a people pleaser, I say yes.
As a money needer.
As a money
say
leader,
yes,
I said
right?
yes. As a
Mm-hmm.
caregiver, yes, I can help you with that. I want
Mm-hmm.
to be able to. So, my roommate and I and our friend made up a club. It's called the No Member of the Week. And every time we said no to something, big or small, we text each other and we would say, I said no. And then we'd all cheer each other on. We like emoji medals to each other, like, you're the
Oh,
no member
wow.
of the week, because we had to practice it because it was so hard.
It
Like,
is.
even saying no to our super who's like, I can't help you today. Can I help you tomorrow? No, we
Mm-hmm.
don't have heat. We need to
Mm.
have you help us today. No, I
Mm-hmm.
cannot wait.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
but I will say, with that practice and that kind of like support group, if you will, of saying no, it did get easier. It's still not
Mm.
always easy, but it was
Mm-hmm.
something I had to practice. Living in
Mm-hmm.
New York helped me because I had to say, like, no, I had to stand up
Yep.
for myself or else
Yeah.
I'd be trampled on. So that's the tip of the week. Say
I love
no
that tip of the
if
week.
and when you can.
And it makes me think about there are times when you think you have to absolutely say no to. And many years ago, I was on a job where this really fabulous woman was the executive assistant to like one of the highest VPs of this company I was working for. And she kind of took me out of her wing. And as an administrative assistant, especially at the higher level of doing that kind of work, it's really difficult to tell someone no.
Mm-hmm.
She taught me this idea is, there's a way of saying no, but you can say you say yes to whatever you can say yes to. And you're still saying no to the thing that you're saying no
Can you
to.
give an example?
So, for example, someone might call you and you know for sure, like someone says, hey, I need you to get this shipped to me today. And instead of saying, no, I can't ship it to you today, because the person, when they hear no, all of a sudden they're like, what the hell? So you learn to say, I can do it tomorrow.
Hmm.
I can do it Thursday. The earliest it can get there is Thursday. Would that work for you? I've never said no to them. I've
Oh,
never, you know what I mean? And you don't get that pushback
yeah.
as much. And yeah, there's going to be people who are like, but I need it today. And then at that point, you can say, well, unfortunately, the earliest we can get it to you is that day. You never use the word no. So that was something that it
Oh.
was a really good, especially for the kind of person that I am, how I am as a human being is I'm always wanting to say yes to people and how can I be helpful? We can't do everything.
Mm-mm.
You don't have to tell someone no necessarily. There are ways in which language can be used to never use that word.
I love that.
And mhm.
That's a
So,
great job tip
right.
too.
Yes,
Because you're right,
definitely at
people get
work.
defensive when they hear you say no, and you don't want to lose your job.
Right.
There's a power dynamic there.
Yep.
That's why it's hard to say no to a boss, because your income is in their hands,
Absolutely.
because they can fire you.
Right. The risk
So
is high.
I like that. I can do it tomorrow. It's like a no in parentheses, like a
Right.
parentheses no.
So you tell them what is possible.
What is
Don't,
possible?
excuse me. Don't tell them what is not possible. Tell them what is.
Yeah. And then
If that's a way.
you're also not bending over backwards to make it
Right.
happen today, where you have to drop everything because you said, yes, let me get that to you today. You said, I can get
And you're
it to you
advocating for
tomorrow.
yourself.
I
You're
love
advocating
that.
for yourself at the same time. So what you're saying is, this is what I'm willing to do for you.
Yeah.
And you're never saying to this person, I don't want to do what you need. You're just saying, this is what's possible,
Yes.
and whatever that is. If that is, it's possible that I can cook you dinner tonight, or it's possible I can order in.
Yeah. I can
Or
pick
instead,
up food.
yeah.
I
Or I
like
can
that.
have
Or
it
like
delivered.
canceling plans. Yeah. Like,
It's option giving.
I can't make it tonight, but I can meet up, or not even, I can't make it tonight. I can, let's do a rain check. I can meet up next week,
hmm
when
Yeah.
I'm not so overwhelmed.
Yeah. And that way, if you are a people pleaser, that's an easier way to easing into saying no to
I
people.
like
I mean,
that.
there are times when you do, like you said, you absolutely have to use the word no sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially if someone's very pushy. There are times that you're just like, no, and that's the end of this conversation.
Even with
there are times that
family,
oh
they
yeah,
ask like 3 times, and I find myself having to say no 3 times before they actually hear it.
I find it more difficult in intimate relationships to say no to someone, meaning family, people who are very close in your life. It's
Yeah.
harder to say no to them. But I do think that it's almost most necessary to say the absolute no to them. I think when you have relationships where there is a power dynamic, meaning is my survival at risk here, like, money at work and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. I think that's the way you have to learn different ways of turning someone down. You have to
Yeah.
learn different ways of using
It's an
language.
art
And
form.
language can be, language
Yeah.
can be used in such a way. The English language can be so creative. We can create so many different ways of expressing ourselves in the language.
Yeah.
And, it's just part of, I think some things are cultural too. I feel like, obviously if you travel around the world, you realize Americans, we have this, we're supposed to be very nice and outgoing and this, that, and the other. And so our language actually, it allows for a lot of different ways that we can say yes.
I found that as a point of confusion in Korea because I was talking around the no and they didn't. Sometimes that was missed with the language barrier. So I also had to learn how to be really blunt there in order to be understood. Because I was like doing the polite way of like, well, I'm not sure, but they that wasn't translating. That like tiptoeing California way of talking politely.
Yeah, definitely California. It's
because New York, what I liked about it is like you see what you get. It's straightforward. I don't find it rude. I find it direct. And that was helpful for me and honestly something I really needed to learn.
Yeah. So I guess I'm teaching the Californian no.
But that's important. We need to have both. Like we need to have both. And I think, unfortunately, as women, we often have to say no or the California no multiple times before people actually stop. And that is something I hope changes. Like, no, I heard somewhere, no is a complete sentence.
It is.
I don't have to explain.
Yep.
I don't have to explain my reasons. My reasons are my reasons. No, period. But we, like you said, we can't always say that so bluntly. Yeah, this is what I can do for you. I like that.
Great.
Cool.
So I guess we'll take a break now and we'll be back to, I guess, ask the question of the day.
Yay. All right. Yay. Sounds good.
Okay. See you after.
We're back. Unless you said, no, I don't want to listen to the rest of this podcast. I'm going to do something else. And we support that.
We do. We do.
So our question for the day is, how do you recuperate? And just to give some context, Joss is coming off of, I would say, a really extreme 3 weeks to a month, both personally and professionally. And I'm coming off starting a new job for the past 3 weeks, which has rocked my world. So Joss, how do you recuperate? Or what are you doing today or this coming week to help you recuperate from the last month?
Well, today I am getting a manicure pedicure. I can't wait. The kind where you sit in the chair and there's a whole massage thing in the chair. I need that. Yes. Listeners, I just ran a half marathon yesterday. It was a trail marathon in the rain. It was insane.
I didn't put that together that it was raining and you were running.
And when you say running, I ran the downhills. I walked or lunged the uphills.
Great.
People were so sweet. I mean, the good thing was people were super sweet. People were very nice. They had a lot of experience, trail runners. I do like trail running now. However, yesterday's course was insane. So anyway, I do need to do that. But I think
But you made it work for you. You did it at your own pace.
I did.
Good.
I did. And I kept telling people, everyone that was going past to me, they would say, "You're doing great." And I would say, "I'm struggling." That was my way of saying, this is how I'm feeling. It was very important that they knew that I was struggling.
Well, you were being authentic. You were being authentic, and you're honest through and through.
I don't know how not to be.
I'm on the struggle bus.
Yeah. I said, "I'm struggling." And they were like, "Great work. You're going to make it. I hope." This is my answer. So that's what you do when you are very pessimistic.
That's not pessimistic. That is being authentic and honest about where you're at.
Yeah, I was struggling, but I made it. I was very happy to make it at the end. My sister has a video of me finishing the race. And literally I say to her, because she's kind of taking a video of me before, it's hard to find where the finishing line was. And I was like, I need to be done. So I'm still jogging. I'm looking relatively strong, not feeling strong. And I say to her, the first thing she said, "You did it. You finished." I said, "But where's the actual end?" It's on video.
For life. Well, let's post the video so that people can see it. Wait, did she run it with you, or she
did, but she beat me by 30 minutes. But this is the huge. This is nothing. Ollie is very, and this is what I'm saying. You think about mindsets, like Ollie has always been the mindset is like, I'm gonna crush this thing. And I'm always like, let's hope we finish. That's what we think. So we
need both. Both.
We do. But Ollie always finishes really, really quickly because she doesn't have to fight her thoughts at all. I fight my thoughts the whole time. Like I'm fighting like, well, you thought you were doing good, but maybe you're not. Jocelyn, if you decided to swim, this was a voice in my head. If you decided to do a swimming thing, you could just swim to the edge of the pool and get out. Like you just got yourself in a situation where no matter, even if you try to stop doing this race, you're still going to have to do this race. Because I would have to turn around and just walk the whole thing. There was no cars or anything. It's
that makes me anxious. There's no out. As an anxious person, I need to know my getaway. What's my getaway car?
It's not for you, Shar. I won't encourage it. Yeah. But in the end, it was, whatever. It was fun and I'm glad I did it. But anyway.
So how are you going to recuperate? Yeah, you're physically.
Physically, I'm recuperating. We got in the jacuzzi last night. And we just kind of, it was nice I got stretched. My sister's boyfriend, gave me a stretch, which was really helpful. Mm-hmm. But this morning we both felt like, a truck had hit us. So I'm recuperating by, getting the little massage. Today I'm going to get my manicure, pedicure. But that's for physical, I think, exhaustion. I think when it comes to mental exhaustion and work exhaustion or emotional exhaustion.
Yeah.
For me, I do have to spend a lot of bit of time by myself to debrief on my own, to kind of check into what I'm feeling. And sometimes that time that I give myself isn't even enough. So I do like to spend time in nature. Getting in the sun for me is something that's very helpful for me. Breathing fresh air, gardening, things like that. That's how I recuperate. And for me, I don't know if there's gardeners out there or people who are infatuated with plants and things like that. There are a lot of lessons I learned from plants, from nature.
What?
Like you can screw up, you can cut pieces off of a plant and be like, oh, I screwed that up. And it'll come back.
Yeah.
If you care for it. If you care for it and you pay attention to it, it'll come back. It's, they're very forgiving. Plants can be very forgiving. And so in some ways, I've learned in the process of me healing through my own things, and I'm, pruning a plant, or maybe I screwed up on the pruning of a plant, or maybe I didn't give enough water to this plant, or maybe I put this plant in the wrong, it has too much sunshine or not enough sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
And all you have to do is kind of adjust and go, okay, let me pay attention to that. So for me, I think in relationships and with codependency and all those things, it is necessary to figure out what that balance is, both in giving care and recuperating from, lack of care. I think those are the things that I've learned a lot from nature. So I garden not just for the sun. I garden because I've learned a lot of things from nature. Teaches you a lot about the resilience of a living thing. So for me, that's how I recuperate. A lot of it is I spend time with myself. I do talk to people who I trust too, like my sister. I can talk to her about things. There was a particular issue that came up this week that was like a traumatic event that had happened in my life that was rehashed, I guess.
Wow.
And as much as I thought that I was over the traumatic event, because it was just very surprising that a person that could be abusive to you in the past would go and ask someone about you. And so this person came to me and told me about this abusive person from my past. And so I had a little bit of a jolt of that anxiety, that adrenaline, that, feeling. And I was able to talk to my sister about it right away.
Good.
And even though I still feel a certain amount of angst about it, me being able to talk to my sister about it, me being able to be honest with the person who was the messenger and be able to explain, the behavior, I think that was helpful. And just knowing that that person heard me, is here to protect me and care for me as well. So I think there are ways in which you recuperate and there are ways in which you don't. And burnout is something. Okay, so once upon a time, I was on a job. And I had at least, one abusive coworker and boss. And I had gotten burned out. Like the idea of saying no is so important. And the earlier you learn to say no, and this is how I've learned to do a better job of checking in very early. You don't realize that you can literally burn out. Your body will just stop working. Your body will just do what it needs to do to survive. And sometimes it just goes on autopilot and it's like, actually, we're going to give you a headache for a month, or we're going to make you not sleep for a while.
And ulcer.
Yes, you get physically ill.
Yes.
And I had never had blood pressure issues, no blood pressure issues at all. Obviously, I'm a relatively active person. Like I do a lot of physical activity, so I'm not an unhealthy person. I'm a relatively healthy person. I eat relatively healthily. And my doctor, obviously, I had always gone for my physicals and I'm in really optimal health. And when I went in for my doctor's appointment during the time that I was dealing with this past working situation, the doctor was like, "Oh my God, you have high blood pressure." I never had this.
Wow.
And it was devastating because I'm sitting there thinking I take such good care of my physical health. But there are times where when you are psychologically abused, you are not listened to on a job, when you tell someone like, this is too much work for me, and they gaslight you, all of this does cause a physical breakdown of your body as well. You aren't just going to be broken down psychologically. It brings on physical form. And so I had to be off work for 3 months. Believe me, it killed me because people know that I love working. I love having a stable income. I'm a single woman. I've always been responsible and taking care of my own bills and everything. And to know that, oh, shoot, I don't know how long I'll have a stable income because I was in such a bad state for 3 months. I mean, the blessing is I made it through it. The blessing was that I had, I always have a lot of sick time because I don't call out. But I do think it's important that people learn that if you have sick time and you're not well or you're overworked, that you take the time off. Taking the time off, in some ways, even if you're not able to say no to the boss, they cannot call you and ask you to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're away and you're carrying a lot, they notice what you've been doing because they can't manage it themselves. And
Yep.
so me being away for 3 months, I don't think that these individuals realized all the things that were on my plate until I was not there.
Yep.
Now, were they remorseful? No, they
Mm.
weren't. And it was just a job that I obviously am no longer at that place anymore, but it was a job I needed to be away from. And luckily I
Mhm.
was able to find, work elsewhere. And so the point is burnout is different from a temporary exhausting week.
Yes.
Burnout speaks to you ignoring yourself or ignoring how important you are to a situation, and valuing someone else's priorities. And so
Mhm.
that's the hard part. We have to try and figure out what those things are. And it's different for every person,
Yeah.
right? I mean, because okay, you're recuperating from 3 weeks of very, very intense work. Like
Yeah, but
you've
I'm
been,
not, I can tell I'm not at burnout. I'm
yeah.
tired. I'm
Okay,
emotionally drained.
exactly.
I feel like I have an emotional and physical hangover.
Mm,
But I think what you're describing with burnout, I've been there.
mm,
And you're right. The body takes it into its own hands.
yep.
Either I get sick, I get injured,
Mm,
I get depressed in a
mm-hmm,
way that it's doesn't go away. I don't bounce
mm,
back. For me,
yeah.
I associate burnout with not being able to bounce back. Like I want to bounce
Mm,
back. I want to rally. I want to wake up the next day and say it's a new day, and I'm not able to do that.
that's it.
And it lasts. And
Mm-hmm.
that there have been about three or four times in my life where I've hit that burnout, and it has taken time. And it's not so easy to bounce back. Today I'm just tired. I
Yeah.
know that I just need to rest and recuperate and
Yeah.
kind of zone out. Interestingly enough, I also like to garden.
Really? I didn't know this.
Yeah, I actually come from a family of farmers.
That's right. I forgot about
Uh,
this. Yes, yes, yes. I
but
do know
I
this
was the
information.
city cousin. My mom, who's like a staunch feminist, grew up on a farm. She grew up on a
Hmm.
dairy farm. She was taught all the ways of being a traditional, homemaker, and she
Hmm.
rebelled and went to college and became a feminist.
Hmm.
And we're known as the city cousin. So I was never interested in gardening until a couple years ago.
Ah,
And I just love looking at my plants.
right.
And like I'm like, oh, that one has a new bud, that one has a new
Hmm.
leaf. Like everything you were talking about for me, it's like there's like such a redemptive quality in plants because I
Yeah.
have over pruned and I have underwatered. And you
Yeah.
know what? They're still here.
Yep.
Most of
Yep. And they
them.
make it.
Not
Yeah. I mean, there are times.
This is
There are times.
Larry
Look,
next to me. Larry's
that's
very low
Larry.
maintenance.
Larry's beautiful.
I think Larry's some kind of fiddle
Big.
fig, yeah,
Yes. I could tell. Yeah.
plant.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And yeah, I find it really redemptive, and I like just going out, and I use it as mental breaks from work where I'm just like,
Hmm.
I'm going to step away. I'm going to water my plants right now, and I'm going to look
Hmm.
at them, and I'm going to look at how they changed.
Hmm.
And oh, that one needs a little bit more water. That one has a new leaf. I really
Yeah.
enjoy it. But I want to go back to some of the things you said, like there was, this resurfacing of this past trauma.
Hmm.
I think there are studies, and
Mm.
I'm not a psychiatrist or researcher, so I can't
Hmm.
cite those studies for you, but there are
Hmm.
studies that talk about how trauma changes the brain.
Yes, there is. Mm-hmm.
And when I've worked with populations that have experienced trauma,
Mm-hmm.
they have one individual shared with me when any time that something similar to that trauma happens, it reopens it and she relives it.
Mm.
And I think we know that trauma changes the brain.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me as a dancer, I think the body remembers.
It does. It said that there's a book called The Body Keeps Score.
Oh,
The
yeah,
Body Keeps
I've
Score.
heard of that.
Mm-hmm. It's great. I have it if you want to borrow it.
Do they talk about that?
They do. They do.
Your
It's a great
body
book.
remembers. We've talked about this before. I can tell myself I'm not in danger, that
Mm-hmm.
trauma's not actually happening to me again, but the body remembers and responds like it is,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like it's reliving it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you were able to get the support you needed.
Yeah.
And it sounds like in that job where you experienced burnout, and correct me if I'm wrong, you actually went on medical leave.
Yeah. I was
for
on
that
leave
3
for
months.
3 months. Mm-hmm.
It sounds like when you were describing it, you were telling the people, I can't take this on.
Right.
This is too much. You were actually saying no. They were bulldozing you and gaslighting you, and your
Right.
body made a decision, a decision for you to protect you.
Yeah. 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 I mean, even though at the time I was like,
do say no.
I didn't want the body. That's the thing.
No, we
You
don't
fight
want the
your
body.
Yeah,
I
you
know.
fight your own physiological
I know
response
that so
sometimes,
well.
and
Yeah.
you don't even. I mean, I think there are people, and maybe I could have pushed beyond that burnout. I'm one of those people that probably would have just kept going. But my doctor it was my doctor who took me out. It wasn't like I was like, I want to be out. It was like my doctor was like, nope, you can't go to
And
work.
unfortunately, you and me will only stop when a medical professional tells us to.
You're so right. You're so
But in
right.
some ways, I'm relieved when that happens because it
Yeah.
takes the decision out of my hands. I just say, my doctor, my therapist, my psychiatrist said this. Like, people can't argue with that.
Yeah.
Whereas you were already telling them this is too much and they didn't listen.
Correct.
They didn't respond. So, I'm glad your doctor stepped in and told you have to stop, because otherwise you and I will try to push through. I mean, I think we should take a break, but I will share after the break, I reached a point where I wasn't able to push through anymore. And that was really disarming.
So I want to hear about that.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that after the break. And listeners, we definitely want to hear from you after this episode. How do you recuperate? Have you experienced burnout? What did it feel like for you? So keep thinking about that when we come back. All right. See you in a bit.
All right. So we're back. We are back.
We're back.
And so, so I really want to ask Shar, I know Shar, she had prepared us before the break that she wants to talk about a time where she experienced burnout, which I knew nothing about this. So I'm interested to know when you experienced the burnout, how did you manage recuperating from it? And what are your suggestions for people who may be experiencing or have experienced burnout in the past? How do you expect people to get through that? And what hope can you give them? Kind of that burnout happens and you can recover from it and become whole again.
Yeah, well, a lot of those I don't have answers to. But remind me to talk about this new book I'm reading after I talk about
Yes.
my burnout story, because I don't want to
Perfect.
forget that, because that is giving me hope.
Mm.
So when I was thinking about this podcast and thinking about recuperation, my brain did go to those kind of landmarks in my personal history of burnout. The first time was I just graduated from college as a dance major, and I got a really prestigious professorship in Singapore teaching dance. Mind you, I just had a BA, but through a
I didn't know
personal
about this.
connection, I got this.
Wow.
I graduated one day. My boyfriend at the time, got brain surgery a week later. A week after that, I was on a plane to Singapore and became a professor, not ever having done grad school, not ever having lived abroad by myself. I was not set up for success for the job. My anxiety, I wasn't diagnosed yet. I just knew I was an anxious person. My anxiety really annoyed my boss, and she kind of took a hands-off approach, and I was drowning. My contract was for 3 years. I wasn't sleeping. I had never consumed alcohol before then because I was a dancer and I didn't want to put crap in my body. I started drinking in order to fall asleep. I wasn't an alcoholic by the traditional standards, but if you think about needing alcohol to fall asleep, like one glass, I really depended on that. I wasn't on medication at the time. And something inside of me said, you have to get out or you're going to end up in the hospital with cancer. That might sound really random, but that just kept, you're like, you're going to get so sick. You have to get out. You have to get out. You have to get out. I broke my 3-year contract. I left after 6 months.
You left after 6 months?
Yep. I left out because I just knew if I stayed, I didn't have the resources there. I didn't have my family. I didn't have a therapist. I was living alone. It was a very prestigious job. I couldn't do it. I didn't know how to make a syllabus. Nobody helped me. I didn't know how to grade. All these things that triggered my anxiety to the point where I couldn't bounce back. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't healthy. And something inside of me was like, you have to leave or you're going to end up in the hospital.
How did they react? Like the people you were working for, how did they react?
My boss didn't talk to me, and kind of the last day was very she's the one who brought me out there. The last day, in a very condescending way, was like, well, what do your parents think, Charlotte? And I was like, well, my parents are worried about my health, so they're supporting me. Well, Charlotte, sometimes don't be afraid to walk the straight line. And I think, like, she meant like, I'm taking a detour by leaving, as like, no, this was the detour because this was unhealthy for me. But at the time I felt a lot of shame. Like I couldn't do it. She brought me out there. I couldn't fulfill her expectations. Now I know I wasn't set up for success. That was ridiculous. And I was, idealistic and naive that I could do it. And part of me is glad that I thought I could do it. And the other part of me is like, whoa, you're
Do you
so
think
young.
so? I think my question also is, as you're talking about, I'm thinking about the dance industry itself and that area of work.
You just do it. You suck it up and you do it.
Okay, so that's the way it is, because I know, like, I have students that I work with who are dance students, and some of them are just, they want to take the dance classes because they thought, oh, I want to be in this performance that, is going to happen eventually. And then they're realizing how much time and dedication that it requires. And their other classes have to kind of essentially stay on the wayside. They're pushed onto the wayside while they do as many rehearsals as possible, as the bottoms of their feet, are peeling. Like
Yeah.
the
There
body
is
itself is being broken down.
yes, there is an expectation in dance culture that you work through the pain.
Mm.
Sometimes it's kind of old school, and I'm hoping it's changing, but it's like if it hurts, you're doing it right.
Ugh.
My blisters are like my badges of courage. I hope that that's changing. For me, the dance culture, and this is a whole other maybe episode entirely. I grew up
Mm-hmm.
in ballet culture, whereas you
Mm.
are silent and you follow directions. And if you speak up, you are seen as difficult. And if you are a woman in a ballet company, there are literally thousands of other women who can who you're told
Replace
will
you, basically.
replace you. So
Mm-hmm.
don't speak up. Don't say no. Don't
Yeah.
say, I'm not willing to do that. And unfortunately, that leads to a lot of abuse in the dance world. That's
Mm.
also coming to light. But,
Mm-hmm.
for me, I wasn't speaking up about how I was in pain in this job.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't letting people know because I didn't have my own voice yet.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think I could do that job and I would speak up and I would let people know ahead of time, I need more support or I'm in pain, or like before I got to that breaking point, I would hope that I would be able to speak up. I was like 22,
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So
With
that
age, a lot
was
of things change. You're right.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I really did find my own voice in New York because I had to. And
Mm.
that was the first burnout. The second burnout was when I came back from New York. I got a job at teaching dance full time. I was scheduled to teach 7 classes a day, 3 days a week. And the other days were like 5 or 6. I can't remember. And of
When
course,
you
I
say
was
7
like,
classes, are you saying 7 1-hour classes,
uh-huh.
7 30-minute Oh
No,
my God.
yeah,
Wow.
50-minute.
Uh-huh.
And dance. So you're
Yeah.
physical,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I can do this. I'm a trained dancer. This is my dream job. I'm going to make this work. I started losing my voice every week. You know how it's like the body tells
That
us?
happens to me too. Yeah. Yeah.
I lost my voice every Thursday.
Specifically Thursday.
Yeah.
Were you working, was Thursday the last day of the week that you would be
No.
working, or you still had to go another day? Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was
Huh.
comatose on the weekends. I couldn't do anything but sleep. And then on
Mm-hmm.
Sunday, I'd prep all day because that's how I managed my anxiety. I was like, I'll plan all day starting at 10 a.m. on Sunday to 6 p.m. Sunday night. I'll plan all my lessons for the week in order to decrease the anxiety of the week of not knowing what I'm teaching. So
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of the pattern. And that time I was working with a therapist. I wasn't on medication yet.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about, okay, I have to fill my boss in. I can't just hit my breaking point and peace out again. So
Mm-hmm.
I did meet with my boss in October and was like, I'm getting sick all the time. I'm losing my voice all the time. This is not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
I need help. Luckily, my boss was very receptive. My hours were reduced.
Mm.
But I think at the end of the year, I left the job because it still wasn't sustainable
Mm.
in terms of my body and my mental health.
Mm. Mm.
And then most recently, the burnout was with graduate school.
Mm-hmm.
I went back for a post-bac in speech therapy, speech pathology. I loved learning again. I was doing the post-bac part-time. It was fascinating. It was about communication disorders. My dad has a communication disorder. I worked with students who were nonverbal autistic students. All of
Mm-hmm.
this was right up my alley. Very competitive to get into grad school, apparently as competitive as like nursing school to get in.
Wow. Oh my God.
I got into a very prestigious one. I lasted not a full semester.
Oh my God. So did you feel guilty, like the fact that you were given this spot and there's a lot of people
Oh,
who
yeah.
wanted that? I mean, you went through that too. Okay, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And also my husband and I moved to the city where the school was. We
Ugh.
uprooted our lives.
Mm,
And what ended up happening is, first I'm tired and stressed. That's normal. You know, they tell you to expect that in grad school. But then it crossed over to depression and I couldn't stop crying. I was crying in class. I couldn't stop crying. I was crying all the time at home. I couldn't get enough sleep. I was in a group project and I could see my teammates' faces looking at me like maybe what I was saying wasn't making sense. I couldn't write. I couldn't put together sentences. My
oh, wow.
brain, there was the cognitive effects of the depression.
Mm,
And
wow.
I told my professor my mental health is really suffering. And she was receptive. She's like, what can we do? Let's brainstorm. But at that point, it was too late. And I said, I just have to quit.
Wow. I mean,
So,
are there early triggers for you? Like, do you, I mean, and I'm saying hindsight's 2020. Do
yeah,
you feel like there was a trigger maybe that it was a red flag and you were like, that's just part of this process
I
of going
just,
to school?
yeah, I don't know when it crossed over from stress where I could recuperate from, where like
Mm,
a day of rest would help me and I could bounce back on Monday. I don't know where it crossed over from stress to clinical
mm,
depression,
right.
where
Hmm.
no amount of zoning out in front of the TV or manicures or all these
Mm,
things we take as self-care. Um, that we call self care stopped working. Nothing was
mm,
working. I was
hmm.
depressed. I was on medication. I was still depressed. I could not get out of bed. Um, my body felt heavy. There was no way for me to recuperate over a weekend.
Hmm. 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 I mean, I
Um,
think that, I mean,
I don't
I
know what the
think,
red flags were.
yeah. And that's the thing, if you think about it, and I know we had discussed this, the difference between situational depression and organic depression, where you biologically need to take something to help you manage whatever mental health issue that you're dealing with, because I
Yeah.
think listeners need to know that there are times when it is absolutely necessary for you to get on a medication so that you can physically make it. It's no different from a person whose, pancreas does not make insulin anymore.
Hmm.
And you've got to inject insulin. If you don't inject insulin, you will have a very bad prognosis and you won't make it. In the same way, the brain is this way. And that is one of the issues that I feel, and I think it's so important to have the podcast. That's why I thought this podcast was so important, Shar. I
Hmm.
remember when we first started talking about it, is that there are people out there who are very comfortable with the idea that I have to take a pill every day for my migraine, or I have to take a pill
Hmm.
every day for my kidneys, or blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
People are oftentimes very judgy about people who need to take a pill for their,
Yeah.
for their mental health. And so I do think there are things that are situational. And then there are times where it's situational and organic at the same time. Like,
Hmm.
you're going through a really difficult situation right now. And what's going to help you is to temporarily, if temporarily, you don't know if it's going to be temporary. Some people, they start, medication, like our guest, Allie that was on the show,
Hmm.
um, was talking about the fact that she was in a situational, you know,
Hmm.
um, depression, depressive mood. And what helped her get through that was medication. And then
Yep.
she goes on and off of them. So there's so many different combinations how people manage their mental health. And I'm grateful, Jar, that you're able to talk about the fact that, you know what, I took the medication and still things are not better. I still needed to get out of the job. That wasn't
Yep.
enough. It wasn't an
And
end all.
it's taken about a year to find the right combination of medications. It's
Mm-hmm.
taken a year for me to find, um, you know, I was getting my mental health prescriptions through my primary care doctor, which can be a really great route because it takes out the step of like finding a psychiatrist to, because when I was low, I was like, I don't have the bandwidth. I don't know where to find a psychiatrist. It's like another roadblock. And then my primary care physician was like, I can prescribe you this. And I was like, oh my God, great. That's more accessible. But then after this last bout of depression with grad school, my primary care physician said, it's time for us to work in conjunction with a psychiatrist. And then I found one for low income, people with low income. He helped me find a different medication combination where a year and almost a year and a half later after leaving grad school, I felt like, okay, maybe I can return to the workforce. Maybe I can do this. And that's, but it took that long. Like I kept wondering like, when is this depression going to be done? When am I going to feel like I don't have to sleep all day? Everybody else has a job. I had a lot of shame about not having a job. When is it going to feel like I'm recuperated? It took the time it took. And yeah, I was on medication at that time in grad school and it wasn't working. And so I had to readjust, but that was a long process. That was a long process.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about bouncing between anxiety and depression.
Oh, yeah.
Singapore, it was anxiety.
Yeah.
In the teaching position, I would say it was both anxiety and depression. In grad school, it was a depression in a way that affected my cognitive thinking skills. And that was wild.
Yeah.
And my only solution was that I had to quit. But I come from a wealthy family. I'm a white woman. There's a lot of privilege there. My parents were able to support me.
Yeah.
That is so not true for the majority of people.
Yeah.
And so I was able to take this time. I'm married. I have a partner. I have a place to live. He has an income, but that wouldn't be an option for most people.
Not an option for me, Shar.
Yeah. I don't really have an answer of how you bounce back.
Yeah.
For me, it was time, and I had the luxury of financial support to take that time. But like you said, you don't have that option. I mean, you did get to a place where your doctor prescribed medical leave. So I guess that is an option for some people.
And depending on your work situation, like I was blessed to have had Tank that much sick time.
Yes.
Right. I was blessed to be a person that has the reputation of having a really great work ethic.
Because you built that reputation.
I built that reputation.
Yes.
And it was out of the ordinary for me to take off work at all. And it always is, unless I take vacation. For the most part, I'm not a person that really calls out sick and that kind of thing. I don't wear that as a badge of honor, because I feel like that in some ways is not taking care of ourselves. I mean, there are times where I'm exhausted. I don't feel like going on a Monday. And I know on Sunday night I shouldn't have gone, but I go anyway. And so that's something that is still an ongoing, I need to be in better discipline there. That's an area that I could really improve in taking care of my mental health. But I think there is this codependency that you bring your full self to work, right? I mean, you bring even your codependency, this idea that I care about everyone else. I want to make sure everybody else is not, now having to pull any amount of weight. Some of that comes from, childhood issues, growing up in a family where, my parents put a lot of pressure on you holding a certain role. And your role was essential and no one else could take on that role. And that's a lie. Because if you pass away, someone's going to have to pick that shit up, right? Like,
and if you're not there, those managers who didn't know how much was on your plate, so it's got to get done somehow. So they're going to figure out how to do it.
It's a lie that's very easy to believe. But all of us, I don't care if you work for yourself. I don't care. You are expendable. You can pass away. And this is what put things in perspective when I went out on medical leave. And my doctor said, and I was like, you don't understand. No one does the work that I do. They don't even know how to do the job that I have. And she said, well, are you living very wealthy now? Like, do you have enough money now? Can you live on like 40% or 60% of your income? Because that's what will happen if you have a stroke. You'll go out on permanent disability and you will have less money than you have now. And I'm sitting up here like, I'm working all this extra hours for no extra money and I'm struggling. Like I'm literally making it I'm surviving. I'm not at all thriving financially. And that was what killed me. It was this idea like, oh my God, I can't afford to be on disability.
Yeah.
I won't even have shelter.
I'm glad your doctor put it in those terms. Like, if you keep going this way, you will have a stroke. You will go on disability. Can you afford to be on disability?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And
it's also really hard to get on disability, by the way.
Really?
It's not easy from what I've heard. I mean, listeners, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've heard, it's really not easy to
basically I could have just
prove.
Yeah. So I could have just been broke for life.
Be on disability.
Yeah. So I think that was the thing that I was like, whoa, when she said that, I so appreciate the people who came in and did the medical intervention for me.
Yes.
Because
we don't listen until it gets there, unfortunately.
No. And the sad thing is we've learned to not even listen to ourselves.
Yes.
We don't even listen to our own opinions of ourselves. And I think it's the fact that I'm learning. This is still, I feel like it's a lifelong lesson for me to think about what's best for Jocelyn. Mm-hmm. Even if it is like, there are very important relationships in my life that I've had to end or put on hold or put a lot of distance between.
Me too.
Because it's not healthy for Jocelyn.
Yep.
And the other person,
long time to learn that one from me.
And the other person in the relationship is like, this is fabulous. I think this is going well. Well, it's going well because I'm Jocelyn. And I'm doing everything I can to keep this relationship together. But I'm never asking you to consider my feelings. And when I ask you to consider my feelings, you're a person that's like, well, you didn't tell me before, so we're just going to keep this thing going. Sometimes you get in patterns of relationships that are really difficult to come out of.
Yep. I mean, when I started saying no, there were people who didn't like it. And who doesn't like it? People who abuse boundaries. They do not like when you say no.
That's it. And I would say, and this is a piece of advice that I like to tell people. Walk away from that person until you need a break from them. And when you tell them that you need a break from them and they gaslight you, you know what kind of person you're dealing with. If you decide to continue that relationship, you got to take the responsibility for the fact that you ignored that.
Well, because my friends, like we said, I cancel a lot. I brought this mug today in honor of today's session. It says, my best friend gave it to me. Please go away. I'm introverting. Yes. At this point, my friends know that if I'm canceling, I usually explain like, I'm so sorry. I'm not up for it. Can we do a rain check? I still really want to see you. My good friends, most of the time, are like, totally go take care of yourself. Don't even worry about it. Right. Because they know me well enough to know, like, to be supportive of that. But if someone's like takes it personally or gaslights, like you said, it's like, oh yeah, you're not somebody who's worthy of being in my circle, because my circle supports me when I take the time for myself. But I think, you are an athlete, you are an artist, we are taught to push through, right? Yeah. And all those other times, that I wasn't burnt out, I pushed through. And then when I got to grad school, I was like, why can't I push through this? Like, I don't have a choice. It was taken out of my hands. My body was crying. I couldn't think. It was taken out of my hands, and it was no longer a choice. I could not push through. And that was a really disarming situation.
Yeah.
Because other times I just be like, just push through, just take the weekend, recuperate, push through. I couldn't push through anymore. And I don't know if that's age. I don't know if that was the symptom of burnout. But when I was younger, I just pushed through, and that's no longer an option for me. For better or worse.
And in some ways that could be your mind meeting your body. And saying, I'm going to they're respecting each other, because there are two different parts to who we are. And the mind can oftentimes make the body do things that you would have never thought the body can do.
Yeah.
But there are times, I think, when burnout hits, that the mind is like, well, I'm trying to do too much. And the body just like, no, I'm shutting you down. And then you respect it. At one point, your mind starts respecting that this is the reality. It's the acceptance of the reality of, you know what? I'm incapable of doing more than this. Yeah. And that's okay. And you have to forgive yourself that there is a ceiling to where, to what is possible for you, and understand that is not anyone who looks down upon you for not being able to do more than what you're capable of is a person who is abusive. It's a person who is always going to be problematic in your life, whether that's your job, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your friend.
No, that person is me. I was like, why can't you bounce back?
Yeah. So you were judging yourself.
I was judging myself, and I was judging myself in a cohort of, young 20-somethings. I'm 39. Like, well, they can pull all-nighters. Why can't I pull all-nighters? Or like, why isn't my binge watching Netflix on the weekend enough to make me feel better to go back on Monday? And that voice, that abusive voice, was mine. Like, why aren't any of my usual tools working? Like, I was meditating on the bus. I was meditating in the bathroom. I was meditating. It's like none of my tools were working because I had reached the burnout. And that kind of, that kind of notion is, I am going to segue to the book now.
Yes, please. Okay. Because that's what I'm like, wait, how did you get through that then? If you went from the place where you are the problem, you yourself are the problem.
Oh, well, I'm still the problem. Listeners, like, I don't have it figured out, but this book is giving me hope.
Yeah.
Right. Because I was judging myself for not being able to push through. I was judging myself by comparing myself to younger coworkers who didn't have a disabled father, didn't have a marriage to maintain, I have to cook my own meals. Maybe they were still living at home. They had the energy to pull all-nighters. They maybe didn't have a history or a tendency towards anxiety and depression. And I was just using that as evidence to beat myself up. So this book is called Real Self-Care, Crystals, Cleanses, and Bubble Baths Not Included.
That's what I like. I love that.
By the author Pooja Lakshman, MD. A transformative program for redefining wellness. Okay, I just started this book and I texted Jocelyn last night. I just started, but I want to talk about this book in the podcast. Basically, so far, I'm on page 32. And the thesis is that this kind of industry of self-care, the bubble baths, the cleanses, all these things that we do that we call self-care that are marketed to us as self-care she calls faux self-care. They're outward things that we're trying to do. And it's not even about judging, like, a mani-pedi would be considered a faux self-care. But you know what? It makes us feel better. I'm not here to judge you for it.
I'm doing it. I'm doing it today.
Yeah, because it feels good and that's fine. But her argument is, she's like, I'm not here to shame you for doing those things, but I am here to tell you that the real self-care is inner work.
It's so true.
It is the inner work that can't be bought. It's not a strategy. We're here giving strategies, at the beginning of every episode. I'm like, maybe I have to rethink that, because it's the changing the way we treat ourselves. So let me just go to this summary.
Okay.
I mean, I could talk about this book all day, but okay. She says, so she makes this distinction between faux self-care as being a noun or a thing, being outward, right?
Okay.
And real self-care as being inward. So she said the 4 principles of real self-care are: 1, set boundaries with others. 2, change how you talk to yourself. 3, bring in what matters most to you. Is this for Jocelyn?
Yep.
4, this is power. Use it for good. In the end, you'll understand that real self-care is not a noun, it's a verb. And while it won't be as easy as buying that crystal-infused water bottle, it sure works a lot better.
Way more permanent, way more, long-term. Yeah, I love it. I agree with that. You know what?
There's profound.
I learned this. I know everyone talks about this book, the 4 Agreements or whatever, and I try to live by those 4 agreements. But in that book, there's a chapter about the death angel or something, because it's written by a shaman or whatever.
Okay.
And there's a concept of this believing, and when you look at your relationships and you look at the things that you're doing with your life, and it's saying, doing things that the death angel can take away. In other words, if you pass away and whatever you're doing is just not even going to be remembered, then it must not be important. So you think about in relationships and the people that you love, buying someone maybe a diamond ring or buying someone a mani-pedi. That's not necessarily something that if you pass away, people are going to be like, oh my God, they gave me this mani-pedi. But what you talk about while you're getting that mani-pedi, the hug that you gave that person when they needed the hug,
the time, the care, how you treat
things
people
that have no price. There's no really kind of human currency that can pay for those things.
Yeah.
That's when I started realizing how you really value a person is not what you do for them. It's what's behind doing what you've done for them. And were you able to communicate the real intention behind the thing that you're doing? And I've tried my best, because I don't always, I'm not a person where I buy a bunch of stuff for people. I don't have money like that. I don't. But I try, whatever it is that I do for someone, I do want it to be something that if I'm taken away by death, that they'll remember that thing because of how it felt for them. Not necessarily that I spent my money or did not spend my money. So I feel like what she's talking about with self-care is self-care for me sometimes is caring for other people or caring for your reputation and caring for your peace and your joy, because these are the things that radiate to other people, that build the environment and the community that you want, because it's all going to be based on who you are as a human being.
And it's an internal work.
Yep.
And she says over and over, I'm not here to shame you for doing the mani-pedi. That's a strategy. That's a strategy. But sometimes the strategies work and sometimes they don't.
They don't.
And
right.
when I was in depression, I was feeling shame that the strategies weren't working for me. Why don't I feel better after I just did a mani-pedi? Other people can't afford mani-pedis, Charlotte. You should be enjoying it. Why don't you feel better after it? Whereas that's a strategy, but really the lasting thing would be to change how I talk to myself. That would be the real self-care.
And believing what you say to yourself. That, I think, to me, that's the hardest part. Because I know these things, like people have, can compliment me and I can believe that those compliments are true. I mean, I can hear them and I can say to myself, people said this wonderful thing about you and you're really good at this, that, and the other. But there are times that, and I can admit this, sometimes I don't even believe my own self-talk.
No, me either.
And I think that that's where
we believe it.
Yes. And I think that that is where the real work is, because even if I do tell myself, hey, Jocelyn, you're so good managing students. You're such a good listener. You're such a good conversationalist. There's still sometimes this self-doubt that's like, well, does everyone think that really? Or and sometimes I even question, is my intention really to support this person or is it to support myself sometimes? Is it self-serving? And so I go between those thoughts, and I would love to hear someone who's a professional or who has some advice on that. Like, that's the advice that I think people like you and I, Shar,
believe myself.
Where do I get into the place of, how do I get to the place
my
where
positive
it's not
self-talk? I believe my negative self-talk. I'm they're an expert.
Yeah, they know.
Everything. How do I believe? And maybe, I don't know. Maybe she'll talk about that in the book. I'm going to keep bringing it. But for me, this is revolutionary that it's not the strategies. And she quotes someone else. I'm just totally nerding out over this book.
I have to get that book now.
Yeah, she talks about, in this best-selling, I'm quoting, in his best-selling book, Effortless, author and leadership expert Greg McKeown, I don't know if I'm saying that right, elucidates an important point about decision-making, the difference between methods and principles. He writes, a method may be useful once to solve one specific type of problem. Principles, however, can be applied broadly and repeatedly. So it's like the methods are the strategies. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But what are my lasting principles that are going to guide, be the umbrella for guide all my decisions? So I thought about you talking about exercising, or maybe you didn't take a run because you had to rest. So it's what's the guiding principle? The guiding principle is that I prioritize my health. Sometimes the method and the strategy is exercise. Sometimes the method and the strategy is rest. Sometimes the method and the strategy is making that gynecologist appointment that I don't want to do. But the guiding principle is that I'm prioritizing my health. So this was really revolutionary to me, because we do in mental health talk a lot about strategies, and we've even done it. Meditation
all the time.
Strategies, the lighting a candle, the gratitude list, and there's nothing wrong with that, she's saying. But when I'm overwhelmed and then I put more self-care stuff on my to-do list, it's another thing I have to do.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
And then that's stressful. I don't have time to go get a massage. I don't have money to go get a massage. I know it's going to make me feel better, but I'm adding all these things to my list and I don't have time for them in the first place, which is why I'm feeling overwhelmed.
Feeling rushed when you go to get the damn, mani-pedi,
going to the yoga class and being rushed that you're late. And then the next group runs in and practically tramples you to get their favorite spot. And then you have to go, it's just like, what's the lasting principle that's going to guide me and going to create real change?
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a question I think, listeners, we have to ask ourselves individually. Like, what can I do that can be lasting for my own self-care?
What is a belief?
Yeah.
Or what is a behavior or what is a principle that can be lasting for my own self-care? Because she also talks about the root of the term self-care. And she said, it started out in the medical field. And then she says, fast forward to the 1970s, and self-care moved from the medical community to activist circles with the Black Panther Party.
Really?
Yeah. This is on page 9 and 10 of her book. The Black Panther Party promoting self-care as a means for Black Americans to preserve their humanity in the face of systematic racism. It was Black women who actualized the concept into public discourse. Audre Lorde defined self-care as a powerful act to reclaim space within a society that demanded minorities and oppressed groups stay small or invisible. As she wrote in her 1988 book, A Burst of Light, caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare.
Wow, I had no idea.
Me either.
Yeah. Can you repeat the title of this book to our listeners? I am going to get it. I'm going to get it myself because I do think that, wow, amazing. So real self-care.
Self-care, crystals, cleanses, and bubble baths not included. Pooja Lakshman, MD. And so now we think of self-care, it's all marketing, right? It's like, like the gratitude mug or buy this new face mask, do a face mask for self-care. But at the root of it, it's about dismantling racist patriarchal systems to take care of ourselves. And I think her argument is that when you set boundaries, when you change how you talk to yourself, you're actually dismantling harmful systems. And you're not going to get that by buying a face mask. It's going to feel good, but it's not going to change.
So temporary. It's so temporary.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was such a good conversation.
Yeah, I'm geeking out on this book, friend.
I love
I'm
this
enjoying
book,
it.
and hopefully we can talk about it in more episodes because I'm sure it'll bring up a lot of other things that will be good for listeners to hear, but also for us. Because it's important for us to say, listeners, this is a podcast that we just want people to have healthy conversations and non-judgmental conversations about mental health. That's what this is about. It's about building a community of people who are willing to take back the power into their own hands. That's what this is. It's
that's
really about
exactly what she says. Yes, it's a way to take back the power. And it starts inwardly.
Love it.
Yay.
Thank you so much for Shar. This was really great. I think both of us pushed today to actually record an episode, and it ended up being just really wonderful. So we look forward to hearing listeners, like, what's your opinion of this conversation and what are things that you can add to this conversation? And we encourage you every day to have conversations with folks in your life. Like, who are your friends? Who is your community? Who are the people that maybe you work with that you can have these conversations about so that you both can do the work of, what was it that you were saying, Charlotte? Breaking down these systems, these barriers. How did Dr.
Dismantling harmful systems that tell us we're not enough, that tell us we should feel guilty for not doing more, that tell us that we're not worthy intrinsically as humans. And
make us suffer from believing that, suffer from, having a difficulty dispelling those thoughts as they come to us. So,
yeah. And listeners, we'd love to hear. I mean, I'm not putting down the strategies. The strategies are there to help us. We're curious about what your strategies are. And I'm also curious about what your principles are. What are your guiding principles? Whether it be prioritize my health or I want to safeguard my time. And what does that look like for you? And we'd love to hear about your experiences with burnout. Because like I said, I don't have the answers, but I'd love to hear your stories about how you worked through it.
All right. So until next time, and again, we'll add on there, whether you're going through a crisis or whether you don't have anyone to talk about something that's going on with you mentally, please be sure to text or call the number 988. That is the free number you can call to speak to a mental health professional who can help you get through this moment that you're dealing with now.
Yeah,
you do not have to do it alone.
In the back of her book, she has resources to find mental health professionals who specialize in working with minority identities.
Oh,
so
beautiful.
We'll put a link to that in our socials too.
That'd be great.
That there are resources available. Okay, thanks everyone. Talk to you next time.
All right. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Join us for our next episode where we discuss imposter syndrome. And take good care.
Go.
Hi, listeners. This is Joss from Two Ladies Just Talking About Mental Health. I want to remind you that if you are experiencing a mental health crisis, please call or text 988 or go to the nearest emergency room for immediate care. And maybe you're not in crisis, but you need a therapist to help you on a more frequent basis, but you're concerned about the cost. Here's a tip. When you're reaching out for therapists, be sure to ask them if they offer their services on a sliding scale, meaning that they can lower their rate to better accommodate your financial situation. And if you're looking for a therapist who specializes in working with minority identities, there are collectives and organizations out there that have you covered too. Here's a couple of those resources. For Black women or girls, therapyforblackgirls.com. If you're looking for a therapist of color, you can go to nopsych.com. That's INNOPSYCH.com. For South Asian therapists, there's southasiantherapist.org. And for LGBTQ plus identities, the National Queer and Trans Therapists of Color Network, which is NQTTCN.com. If you are parenting as an LGBTQ plus person, rainbowfamilies.org. Again, when you contact a therapist, please ask, do they offer their services on a sliding scale? That will help reduce your financial burden. Blessings to you on your search. May you find a therapist that meets your need.